Well, once again, going live, waiting for that green light. I learned if I don't wait for it, then I get stuck like yesterday. There it is, green light. Welcome to July the 15th. You know, an interesting thing happened to me today. I bought a package from eBay, and it says, put in your mailbox this morning at 9:58 a.m. Check the mailbox, nothing there. Checked adjacent mailboxes, nothing there. This won't be the first time that some postal worker has misread the address and stuck it in the wrong box. But then again, you never see an ad that says, wanted, postal workers must have scintillating IQs and good judgment skills. You don't see that. Now, I'll stop bad mouthing them and get back to the book. Let's put this keyboard away. Yeah, it's something I was looking forward to. Damn shame, don't know where it went. That's okay, I'll get my money back in 2 or 3 days. And next time I buy used golf balls, I'll go to a driving range and buy a bucket. All right, that's said and done. Chapter 10, Divide and Conquer, Moscow's Secret War. This is in the book. The title is The Darkening by Rob and Laura Petri. All right, here we go. Using the principle of divide and conquer, Moscow launched a multifaceted campaign against the United States. You know, the purpose of this campaign was entirely designed to polarize and divide the American people, and to do so to such an extent that they could literally watch Americans defeat themselves. Then all Moscow would have to do, through her agents in fifth column, is come out of the shadows and sweep up the mess. What to do was obvious. Their goal was to promote an American Negroes versus all others mindset, a policy, if you will. They would pick at the scab of non-Negro shame and prejudices between the races until the social wound bled. That's where systemic black on white racism was born. You're always hearing these whiners say that white on blacks racism is systemic. No, quite the other way around. I'm not going to argue that. Let's go on. Moscow launched their plan, inserting Negroes into positions of authority within the non-Negro population was only the beginning. It was neither easy nor was it cheap, but the very principle promised eventual success. Moscow learned that the American Negro mind was far more easily manipulated than that of the non-Negro mind. In multiple writings and studies, leading anthropologists agree that the plasticity of the Negro mind and ethos is very, very real. In fact, a major factor that worked in Moscow and continues to be used today is the malleability of the Negroid psyche. During their efforts to establish a beachhead, if you will, Moscow came to realize that Senator Joe McCarthy was gaining unexpected support. His Committee on Un-American Activities was drawing positive attention. More and more Americans were listening to him, listening on the radio, watching on TV, and reading about him in newspapers and magazines. The intrigue that surrounded his committee on American activities, un-American activities, this mystique, it drove the communist Jewish press to cover the hearings anyway. They didn't like covering them. They didn't like telling the truth, but it was intriguing. The American people wanted to know more. More than just the communist ideal. The money to be made selling airtime around these committee hearings, money always wins out. Major media loathed McCarthy, as today's media loathes Trump. But public demand overpowered the will to downplay the subject of American communists on trial. More and more Americans were brought before the committee to answer for, everything from spying to trading in secrets. Look at the Rosenbergs. Another story. The influence of television had far more effect than predominantly Jewish communist owners understood. Understand, the people who owned the media had no idea TV was still considered a fad, a plaything, but it was gaining in popularity. People would watch as congressmen and senators entered their living rooms by way of TV. It was mostly the mainstream media's ignorance of TV's influence that almost destroyed, almost wiped out the communist plans for the United States. Suffering an ineffective president, Americans looked for leadership and cast their eyes on people like the young senator. The man made waves, he was making progress. But that wasn't to last forever. Chapter 11, the Committee on Un-American Affairs, and McCarthy goes after traitors. McCarthy had become something of a superstar. His growing support at the grassroots level was undeniable. His fame, charisma, and frank honesty attracted many Americans while scaring Moscow half to death. President Truman, on the other hand, was viewed as cunning, evasive, unreachable by the common man. As Moscow's man, the Soviet he was, the Soviets gained full control from top to bottom in Washington. Truman was already deep in their pocket. They had him in their pocket. But the legislature, they'd made him a lame duck president. Moscow finally came to the realization that McCarthy was now a very real threat to Moscow and her plans. By the way, lame duck, that's a person or thing that is helpless, inefficient, ineffective. That describes the waning years of the Truman presidency. With the advent of TV, the media broadcast McCarthy's committee hearings right into Americans' homes. This proved a lot more powerful than radio because it's a visual means. TV was a tool the commies had largely overlooked till it was almost too late. Many people believed that TV was here today, gone tomorrow, kind of like the hula hoop, passing fad, and they were wrong. Look around today. Before Moscow could successfully brainwash the majority of Americans, they had to destroy the work of Senator McCarthy. They had to destroy the work of his committee. They had to totally wipe out the Committee on Un-American Activities. And they had to get him off the small screen right away. America was now fighting in Korea, ostensibly a war to curb the faceless communist menace. While Americans fought the Chinese and the communists, understand this wasn't just Korea. They were fighting North Korea and China. While they were fighting them on one front, they were lapping up Russian communist propaganda on the other. Americans were saying, evil, evil, evil. Oh, that communism isn't such a bad thing. And Senator McCarthy, he had so much support in both houses that he now posed a major threat to the Communist Party's agenda. Tomorrow we're going to read Chapter 12, Traitors Everywhere, Jewish Communists Exposed, and Chapter 13, McCarthy Under the Gun, Immediate Lynching. That'll be tomorrow. Thanks for listening.